Molweni, Dumelang, Sanibonani, niyakwazi uthetha? Kanjele Prat. Kanjele Prat. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Sipho Mahokoto. I'm chairing this session. We only have 1 hour. I want you to speak for an hour so that they don't have questions. They don't need to ask questions. So thank you so much. Let me thank you, your colleague now here on the stage. I want to introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker, who was welcomed already by our Dean, Professor Reginel. I want to introduce the theme, but also who the speaker is for this morning. In front of us, we have Prince George Mahlangu, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the CRL Rights Commission and was appointed in January 2025. He's a member of the National Initiation Oversight Committee and has conducted extensive oversight visits across the country in support of the Provincial Initiation Coordinating Committee. He is from Amandebele Nzunza Sokhulumi Traditional Authority, one of the only 2 recognized traditional authorities in Gauteng. Prior to joining the CRL Rights Commission, he presented the traditional authority in the City of Tshwane council meetings. With Gauteng not having a provincial house and not having any legislation on initiation, he helped to create a unique approach of ensuring that all municipalities, all with offering bylaws on initiation practices, were coordinated and participated in bringing hegemony and alignment across the province. This was done by organizing regional, provincial workshops, as well as provincial summits to plan, prepare, create awareness, and communicate with stakeholders in the province. The most critical task during his tenure was ensuring that all stakeholders participated in decision-making. Prince George Mahlangu is trained in engineering and has extensive experience in senior management, project management, and stakeholder engagement. So his theme for today, from the CRL Commission, he will speak about corruption and socio-economic justice. Brother, we welcome you on the stage to present your input.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sipho Mahokoto. Kya leboha ndiyabulela. You know, when we do salutations, just recently, during the Easter festivities, I had an opportunity of being in the same room as President Ramaphosa. And I reminded him that every time he does the salutations, Dumelang, Sanbona, there's always 1 or 2 languages that are left behind. And one of those is Isindebele, Lochani. So whenever you hear the president making a salutation and he doesn't leave Lochani out, you must know it's me. Because I was asked by a young student who was doing an assignment on the president's speeches. And then he came to me and he said, you are a commissioner of the CRL, which is looking after language. Why is it that the president, in most of his speeches, always falls short of saying Lochani in his rebel? So this shows you what happens when a community starts feeling left out, or that, you know, there is no justice in terms of the balance of things. It may be a small thing, but we don't know what this could manifest into. I just thought, as you still skipped Lochani, so Every time you start your salutation, starts with Lochani so that you don't leave it behind. Good morning. I think an hour is a long time, but I am here. So, the most important thing is the engagement. And I think from this morning, I can see that I'm in a safe space. I've been in other engagements where you know that it's going to be, and robust is okay, but you know that afterwards it's going to be, I'm not good in social media, but there's memes, there's all sorts of things. But that's also okay. But I think for me, the safe space is because this is an academic institution which allows for this robust engagements to take place. And I think it is in that spirit that whatever engagement that we have, in my view, it will not be about who is right or wrong, whose perspective is better, but it is about solving a problem. I actually am a mechanical engineer, so the rational thinking part of it is the most critical aspect of how we find these solutions. How do we get together in dealing with the challenges that besiege our communities and our country? Let me just thank you, Program Director. Greet the Dean of the Faculty of Theology, Professor Nell, distinguished academics, religious leaders, students, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen. Let me indicate to you that it is both a privilege and an honor to address you on behalf of the CRL Rights Commission. I think our forefathers who were putting together our constitution, there's just something that we should give them kudos for, because they thought of all these things in establishing the various commissions that we have in this country. The CRL Rights Commission is unique in its formation around the world. Many of its functions in other countries are embedded in the Human Rights Commission, but in our case, we have it as a standalone commission. So, as I speak and address you, I speak on behalf of the commission. I do have personal views, but in this instance, I represent the commission in its entirety in terms of this discussion. I wish to express our sincere gratitude to the university, especially the faculty and the organizers of this winter school, for this important invitation to participate in this important gathering. You would have seen in the news the CRL Rights Commission, our processes that we've set up that are topical, that are in the news. I think this theme, therefore, that we are talking on is an opportunity to further strengthen the engagement and the debate around issues that affect our communities. This year's theme for this winter school, ethical behavior as a cornerstone of society's soul, could not be more relevant to the challenges facing South Africa today. I think the professor before me talked about the Mahlangu Commission, talked about all manner of things. So if you think about it, it is us in this room who can really bring it home and deal with some of these issues once and for all. Essentially, the theme itself really is in touch with what is happening in the country, not only on issues that are ventilated at the Mahlangu Commission, but also on the issues of religion. We gather at a time when our nation continues to grapple with poverty, unemployment, inequality, social fragmentation, and perhaps most significantly, a crisis of public trust. These challenges are not merely economic or political, they are fundamentally ethical in nature. The question before us is therefore not simply whether corruption exists. We know it does. The question is what corruption reveals. What corruption reveals about the moral condition of our society, and what responsibility rests upon each of us to restore integrity, accountability, and most importantly, justice. I will briefly touch on the CRL's mandate. Often people say we are the commission with a long name, but it is because of our mandate that you find differing commissioners forming part of the commission. So the balance is always to say, how do you balance culture, religion, and language? I come from a traditional community, for instance, but if you think about how South Africa is shaped, and you'll notice that within a traditional community, you have all three of these mandates. You have culture, religion, as well as language, forming part of the various communities that we have. So across the commissioners that we have people from the broad spectrum of what constitutes the commission. The commission is established under Section 185 of the Constitution, which is why I said our forefathers had foresight and wisdom. It is one of the last commissions to be established in 2004. Our mandate is to promote respect for the rights of cultural, religious, and linguistic communities, to foster peace, friendship amongst communities. And there's a distinct difference between the Human Rights Commission as well as us. We are talking communities. Humanity, tolerance, and national unity among these various communities, these CRNL communities. But also to investigate any issue that strengthen the rights and dignity of the communities we serve. At first glance, one might ask, what does corruption have to do with cultural, religious, and linguistic rights? The answer is very simple. Corruption attacks the very communities we are constitutionally mandated to protect. When public resources intended for school disappears, it is communities that suffer. When clinics are under-resourced because funds have been stolen, it is communities that suffer. When infrastructure projects collapse due to fraud and maladministration, it is communities that suffer. When vulnerable religious, cultural, and traditional communities are exploited by unscrupulous leaders, or deprived of opportunities because of corruption, it is communities that suffer. Corruption is therefore not merely a financial crime, it is an assault on human dignity and social justice. In understanding corruption, Transparency International defines corruption as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. While this definition appears straightforward, the consequences are profound. Corruption manifests in many forms. We see grand corruption when senior officials manipulate procurement processes, divert public funds, or abuse state institutions for personal enrichment. We see petty corruption when ordinary citizens are compelled to pay bribes to access services that should be available to them as a matter of right. We see political corruption when institutions are manipulated for partisan interests rather than public good. And perhaps most dangerously, we see social corruption when unethical conduct becomes normalized and accepted as simply the way things are done. The moment society begins to accept corruption as inevitable, we begin to lose something far more valuable than money. We begin to lose the moral compass. You know, as I drove here last night, I said, I don't need to worry about potholes around this town. No, it's a big deal in Gauteng. It's a big deal, even in the city of Joburg itself, you know. It was a marvel just to experience that, to see people walking at 9 p.m. without, and I'm talking women, you know, without even worrying about any issue. So for me, on a Sunday, by the way, you know, for me, it was just a different experience. Can you imagine what would happen if instead of doing the cold drink, do you all know the cold drink with the traffic officer? Okay, just that experience. If half the people said, we will not do cold drink this time around, okay, maybe you can keep a flask and just offer the police officer a cup of hot coffee. But if half the people say, I am not going to give cold drink, even if the inconvenience of having to come back here to pay my fine because I'm maybe not so technology savvy, you know, so I may need to do it manually, have to come here, but that's the inconvenience of having to break the law. If half the people, I mean, there's professors and scholars here. Mathematically, you can actually do a proper analysis of the impact of what would happen to just that issue alone that I think is, we are almost always exposed to that, you know. And I know that if I just give him 100 rand, I don't need to go and pay that fine. The fine will probably also be higher and whatever. Sometimes it's just the inconvenience. In other countries, they have other mechanisms which incentivizes the traffic officer. So the traffic officer gets what would have been a bribe, but is paid by the state to enforce the law. You know, so all I'm saying is that we may list even the bigger things that talk to corruption or unethical behavior, but at times that aspect has to start with the communities themselves by refusing to do certain things that are at their disposal. And often that is how culture is bred and behavior is then becomes entrenched in a society. The human cost of corruption is such that too often we discuss corruption as an abstract or in abstract terms. We speak about billions of rands. A few years ago, I think no one would even conceptualize the scale of corruption in numbers. But today we talk about trillions since the inception of our democracy. We speak about tenders, procurement processes. Behind every act of corruption is a human story. I've just indicated, with the traffic fines. Behind every stolen public fund is a child who sits in a classroom without adequate resources. Behind every fraudulent healthcare contract is a patient denied treatment on time, perhaps. Behind every infrastructure project that fails is a community denied access to clean water, safe roads, or decent houses. These are important things. These are things that change or that give the feeling that our society is getting better. From where we come from those days of apartheid, we need to do these important things in order for our communities to get the feeling that they are part of this democratic dispensation that is really looking after all their needs. So this is the impact. The impact is we have a society that may not feel that, and this is even demonstrated partly by some of the march and march events that are taking place, whereby the social conditions result in this kind of community protests, which when you analyze, you may get to a point where you say, no, it's actually not the key issue is not the foreign nationals, but it is rather the socio-economic situation that we find ourselves in as a result of the endemic corruption levels that we have seen. So corruption is not victimless. Its victims are often the poorest of the poor and most vulnerable members of society. Those with resources can frequently find alternatives. Those without resources cannot. Consequently, corruption deepens inequality and reinforces historical patterns of exclusion and marginalization. The poor become poorer, the vulnerable become more vulnerable, and the promise of democracy increasingly difficult to realize. And I will explain later the community that I come from in terms of just their experience of democracy. And when I say so, I do not demean or diminish, the backgrounds that you distinguished guests that are all here come from. It's just a microcosm. It's just an example of what it means to this community whenever they see anything that is topical that is taking place This is a community that is, in Gauteng they say there's no villages. So there's the one village that you have in Gauteng where I come from. And that's where you see how in a metropolitan setting, you still find these type of communities that exist even in those places. And then we then look at the impact of the general issues. I usually say to Premier Panyaza Lusufi that we always get things last because we are on the periphery. The focus tends to be on the townships and metropolitan areas. But I'll touch a little bit on that as an example. Corruption is a human rights issue. It's a human rights issue. I'm glad, I saw on the program the Human Rights Commission is also addressing this gathering, because indeed it is a human rights issue. And the Constitution guarantees every person a range of socio-economic rights. These include the rights to health care, education, housing, food, water, and social security. Yet these rights cannot be realized where corruption flourishes. When funds allocated for healthcare are stolen, the constitutional rights to healthcare is undermined. When education budgets are misappropriated, similarly, those rights to education are compromised. Corruption, therefore, represents far more than a governance failure. It constitutes a direct assault on constitutional rights. It frustrates social transformation. It perpetuates injustice. It denies future generations the opportunities they deserve. Most importantly, it undermines the constitutional vision of society founded upon human dignity, equality, and freedom. Now let's talk about the impact on the CRL Rights Commission, or communities, as we say. In terms of our Act, we are empowered to establish community councils within the culture, religion, as well as the linguistic spaces. So the Commission is acutely aware that corruption often affects cultural, religious, and linguistic communities in unique ways. Faith communities often serve as the first line of support for vulnerable populations. So whenever there's a challenge, our communities will run towards churches or spiritual houses. Therefore, religious institutions, in a way, feed the hungry. They shelter the homeless. They provide counseling and offer hope to those communities that are facing these hardships. So when corruption diverts resources away from public service, faith communities are often left to fill the gap. At the same time, religious and cultural institutions themselves are not immune from corruption. While we are experiencing what we are experiencing, the same thing is happening within our institutions that we should seek refuge. And it manifests in various ways. The Commission has over the years investigated numerous complaints involving financial misconduct, exploitation of congregants, abuse of authority, and governance failures within faith-based institutions. Again, I think I'll use that because it's in the correct way. If I translate it into English, I butcher the meaning. We say zifa ngamvuinye. Okay, zifa ngamvuinye. So all it takes is one university to do something that is undesirable for all universities to be painted with the same brush. Essentially, the perception that the communities view the church can sometimes be influenced by one incident or a few incidents. And in this case, I'll tell you about my community. 60% of our communities, 60% plus of the South African communities are from traditional authorities. So over 60% of the South African people come from traditional authorities. We have over 800 traditional leaders that are recognized in terms of our constitution. So when these communities say to me as a commissioner, as I visit their communities, they say to me, when we see corruption within the faith-based environment, why is it that we see it manifesting to black people? Program director said this is a safe space. It is just a question that as the commission, amongst many other things that we have to respond to, we are asked that question. Why is it when you see people eating grass, it is black people? When you see, I can go on. I think I keep forgetting, maybe I might not be in a safe space and so on. But let me take you, the point is taken. But that statement that I made when I say zifa ngamvuinye is that in the eyes of the public and certain communities, they will say all churches are like that. They fail to distinguish between what we would call a tithe, because it serves a particular purpose, and there are those that would abuse that. I have seen a person in my community that has taken his whole pension and given it to a pastor who was, who promised him, even bigger, returns. So when you see that, and this vulnerable person is sitting next to you, instead of running to the church, he comes to the traditional kraal and says, I have this challenge. These are the things that we are looking at. So the commission sought to address some of these things. Perhaps I often say, if you were in our shoes, you would think of a different approach to how we have gone about resolving, or to try and get the debate going. In the midst of everything, for us, it is the debate. It is this topic that is currently being discussed at this winter school. If it generates the necessary discussion for us to address these issues, then as the commission, we are on the right track. We receive a lot of critique in the manner with which perhaps we have approached these things. But again, I say to you that this is that subjective level, because it's simply based on the fact that at our disposal are these complaints that we receive on a daily basis. When you look at the Omotoso case, which is a classic case, and people often accuse us as, why are we harping on the Omotoso case and making it as if it is because it was so horrific in all its, the deed itself, the socio-psychological impact to the victims, because there was a social media meme to say, no, but the victim left and then returned. You know, when someone that you respect, such as a priest, pastor, that you revere immensely, tells you, you need to do this in order to get rid of the demon that is possessing you, or when he says to you, the Lord says, you must do A, B, C, give me your, donate your pension, your full pension to the church, sleep with me, and all these manner of things. And you see a victim that has otherwise no reason to doubt the integrity of this person. Then you have the audacity to ask, why did she return? Because of those threats, instead of addressing the elephant in the room. So, as the Commission, we've had to deal with this issue hands-on, and therefore our passion may be a little bit not overreach. It's not overreach. It's maybe we say it with much more passion, and maybe without even looking at all I'm saying is that as part of our mandate, we need to maybe look at and listen to voices that can bring us closer to finding a solution. I think the important thing is that one way or another, we must find a solution to this challenge. I'll give an example. I gave an example to an audience in Limpopo on a similar discussion. And I said, if you see, as the religious leaders, if you see one of yours, a pastor, perhaps, doing something that is bringing the faith into disrepute, why don't you issue a statement? Why don't you just issue a statement condemning that deed? Why don't you come together? And it's a simple thing, but I think that will then change the perspective, or start changing the perception. And that will say to us, we know that, the religious leaders have condemned this deed, and so on and so on and so on. I think it's those little things that I think we need to start doing. And when you see your peer, tell him, this is bringing the whole institution into disrepute. The important thing is that for me, for the community that I come from, it must be able to say, whenever I need that spiritual nourishment or the hope that I require, I can safely go to a church. And that should be a safe space for me to be able to deal with the challenges and hardships of this life that we live in today. So there's a huge impact based on, and we conduct these investigations with absolute procedural, there's processes that we follow that can stand legal muster. Most of the people within the commission, we basically have a lot of legal people to ensure that everything that we do can be dealt with. Okay, I think I need to move faster in order to cover everything, but as I indicated, we've investigated numerous complaints involving various aspects: misconduct, exploitation of congregants, abuse of authority and governance. This reality reminds us that ethical accountability must begin at home, which is this engagement. This is a fantastic setting to start this engagement. No institution, whether public or private, religious or secular, should consider itself exempt from scrutiny. Integrity is not optional, it is essential. The role of faith-based communities in ethical renewal, such as this winter school's theme, invites us to reflect on ethical behavior as the cornerstone of society's soul. If that is true, then faith communities occupy a critical position in shaping the moral character of society. I'll repeat that. Faith communities occupy a critical position in shaping the moral character of our society, because religious leaders influence values. Faith institutions shape consciences. Places of worship provide spaces where ethical principles can be taught, modeled, and reinforced. Faith communities, therefore, have an important responsibility. They must preach integrity, they must model accountability, they must reject corruption, regardless of who benefits. They must refuse to legitimize unethical conduct, and they must speak truth to power, even when doing so is uncomfortable. Even when telling another, your fellow pastor, preacher, reverend, that this is not, you must preach, you must say it without fear or favor. The prophetic tradition found across many faith traditions demands nothing less. History reminds us that religious communities played a significant role in confronting apartheid and advancing justice. The same courage is required. How did we do it during the apartheid years? It is the religious communities that brought this dispensation that we have. The culture of accountability. Accountability is not about punishment. It is about creating a system and cultures that encourage ethical conduct and discourage abuse. We have this section 22, which is consulting. We can discuss it perhaps in the Q&A, which many people say it is a council or it is, no, it's a consultation. It's like this lecture. It's like this discussion here. It's a consultation to say, how do you hold each other accountable? So we must therefore build a culture of accountability. that seeks to strengthen institutions, support independent oversight bodies, protect whistleblowers, promote transparency in both public and private institutions, cultivate ethical leadership at every level of society, because ethical leadership is not demonstrated by words alone, it is demonstrated by conduct. People follow examples far more readily than they follow speeches. The leaders of tomorrow are watching the leaders of today. What lessons are we teaching them? A call for the next generation. I thought there would be a lot of students. That's the setting that I had. So I thought that I would plant the seed from the Commission's perspective. But for those students that are in the audience, the future of ethical leadership in South Africa rests substantially in your hands. You are entering professions that will shape our nation's future. Some of you will become academics, some will become clergy, some will enter government, others will serve in business, law, medicine, education, or civil society. Whatever path you choose, remember this: competence without integrity is dangerous. Power without accountability is destructive. Success without ethics is hollow. South Africa does not merely need skilled leaders, it needs ethical leaders. Often the issue we are confronted with in these settings are ethical issues. And and people have argued that there are laws. There are laws for every crime that is committed within the sector. They've argued that. But we've just talked about other corruption issues which the law cannot enforce and so on and so on. What if it is your child that is experiencing that and you have to stand up and so on? So in this case, there's no law for ethics, for an unethical behavior. How do you charge that person and so on? Conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I'm reminded of the reflection contained within this program. It speaks of clean hands and a pure heart. I think there was a quote there, clean hands and a pure heart. These words are more than personal aspirations. They are societal imperative. The soul of a society is not measured by the size of its economy. It is measured by its commitment to justice. It is measured by how it treats the vulnerable. It is measured by when those entrusted with power exercise it responsibly. It is measured by whether ordinary citizens are prepared to defend what is right, even when it is difficult. Corruption thrives where silence prevails. Justice flourishes where courage prevails. Let us choose accountability, let us choose integrity, and let us work together to build a South Africa where ethical behavior is not exceptional, but foundational. A South Africa where justice is not an aspiration, but a reality. A South Africa whose soul is strengthened by the values we profess and actions we take. I thank you so much for bearing with me and listening to me. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Colleagues, we don't have much time. I will open time for questions, but also comments. Your comment should be very short. Your question should be very short, be specific. I don't want somebody who will make another contribution. We've listened. Let's now take hands for questioning. Reverend Ubuntu, can I take 3 questions in this round? If possible, I will give another round, but let's take 3 questions. Reverend Ubuntu, is there any other hand? Ashwin and also, yeah. So I have those 3. Just say your name and then ask your question.
I just want to say that, thank you so much, and just two things. The first one is, by the way, don't go back to Gauteng and say, it depends where you drive. So don't go back to that narrative. Depends where you drive. We have soldiers for pamphlets, we have shootings happened last night in Langa, so don't go with that. And then secondly, your topic of corruption is, thank you very much for really outlining it. I'm not making a contribution, zero. I just want to problematize it further a little bit. I think as South Africans, what we did wrong after what we did right is to build a democratic South Africa on top of the wounded and bleeding foundation. We didn't dismantle anything. I'll tell you why. We didn't dismantle anything, we just built on top of that. Now, what will happen, we extinguish flowers with distinguishing fires, English. And for instance, we have the minister, we have the Department of Women and Children. When something comes up, Commission of Mahlangu. Do you know what that said? You said it so well that what you said, corruption is taking away, that's 150% true. I want to add what also corruption is taking away. Corruption is taking away the focus from that bleeding foundation of South Africa. We still have racism, by the way. Gender-based violence, we're dying. Everything, you know what happened with the racism? It's thriving now because you don't have to say that. You can say it in your heart and have the attitude. And that you cannot go to the commission and say that. Those are the things that corruption is taking away from people. We have a very angry, wounded society. It's not only corruption, it's rotten the foundation that we build this beautiful democracy on the rotten. Because we wanted to be nice. You know, kumbaya. Thank you.
Thank you. The hand, Ashwin?
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll just brief. I'm wondering, Commissioner, you mentioned that church should reduce statements, and I'm often bothered by the idea of the insinuation that corruption is always external to the church. Because if we pretend in as if we're not ourselves corrupt, I'm wondering in this age of fire poles and sofas and couches, because we pretend as if politicians are only corrupt and not we ourselves. And so my question is, are statements enough? I'm friends of people that it seems to me at least, the media is better holding church leaders accountable than we ourselves. And I'm friends of many of these church leaders that we held accountable by the media. And so I'm wondering, I want to engage you because you're part of the commission. Do you think we should engage in constructive forms of shaming individuals internal to religious communities who are committing corruption? As the outcome of religious communities, to shame the individuals we look up to who are committing corruption. Constructive forms of shame. Is that a possible way forward? Not in a political sense, but in a restorative sense.
The last question? There.
I've just got two questions. How is it possible that amidst all the checks and balances that have been put in place ever since 1994, and amidst the presence of different levels of law enforcement, different commissions, different authorities, all these forms of corruption still prevail? Question number two, if authors of the Cairo document were gathered in Stellenbosch University rather confronting corruption than apartheid, what are they demanding of us, and what are we prepared to do before we leave this world?
Okay. I'll give the Commissioner time to respond to these three questions.
No, thank you very much. I think, let me start with your question. I think we tend to do, we tend to write the best laws, you know, the intentions, and they assume a perfect homogeneous society or communities, you know. So we have what is deemed to be a world-class constitution, which is now being challenged by those poor and vulnerable who feel that it is actually maybe a hindrance, you know. So there's that manifesting where people start seeing that, no, this is not working for us, this is not... So law enforcement in itself, you'll see in my biography, we talk a lot about initiation. It's because, and I'm addressing you, there are many other areas, it's not only churches, in cultural, that we are dealing with. Initiation is killing our children. That is why the commission said, Commissioner Mahlangu, just focus most of your energy on this thing, because here we have lives that we lose as a result of culture. You know, so there are laws in that space. So there's what they call the Customary Initiation Act. So I'm linking the two questions. When you look at that act, the Customary Initiation Act, it was not written by Umxhosa, Indebele, Mupedi, Mosotho. No, it was written by someone who doesn't even understand the culture, who doesn't understand what is initiation, ulwaluko yintoni. To us, this is a rite of passage. You know, there's a book, I think now that I interact with a lot of universities, I must think of writing this, because there is the science in initiation that predates even Isaac Newton, just the astronomy and astrology of it all, that predates the great Isaac Newton scientist, that because of the dating system that we have. But all I'm saying is that we have a law which was not properly written, despite the public participation and consultation. So that's an area that I think we need to strengthen. It's a separate issue that we need to deal with. And those that says that there are enough laws are correct. I can't say no to that. They are correct that there are enough laws to deal with anyone who performs a particular crime in a traditional. So in that sense, even if you were to put legislation to say this is how you must shame, I think for me what is important is when everybody rises together and condemns a bad deed. Then that way it will have a far more profound and meaningful impact. But maybe through these consultations, we need to come up with a mechanism, a peer review mechanism of some sort that would hold us accountable. Shame us, yes. Religious leaders, the biggest mistake, you must just tell me on time, religious leaders that we've engaged that are against the CRL on the Section 22, often they are not telling the truth when they say the CRL is against religion, because we are not talking doctrine. Okay, they're not telling the truth, and I'm ashamed at some of the utterances that they make, because we've said to them, we want to put together religious leaders to go across the country and consult other religious leaders to come up with a unanimous consensus on whether to put legislation or what, or a shaming forum, if you like, you know. But for religious leaders to do that, we are not talking about religion or doctrine. We are far from that. In our case, in terms of the Constitution, you can believe anything. You can believe in this bottle of water. The Constitution allows us to protect you, okay? But you can't violate other rights as you do that. So in this case, I think that all that we are saying is that religious leaders, hold yourselves accountable. Come up with a mechanism to hold yourself. And we just provided that conduit. It's true, we may have a vested interest of the outcome. It's true, it's normal, okay? And therefore, you might be apprehensive about that interest that we have. But that's the debate should continue. So corruption is not only in churches. Traditional healers, I can tell you horrific and horrendous stories that I'm dealing with traditional healers, the abuse of initiates. We call them those that train those that are going to be izangoma or traditional healers. You know, there are horrific stories of rape, of things like this. I'm merely just citing things that relate to this audience. So yes, we need a shaming forum, a shaming. And Siswam, it's true what you are saying. I can't add to. Again, is the perception. You see, I can ask you now: will Bafana go to the next round? What is the perception? What if it were the Springboks? Would the Springboks have? Will the Springboks next year in the next World Cup come up? But I'm going to leave here saying Cape Town, and in particular Stellenbosch, is a fantastic town. Because of this simple experience. Yeah, but you've just alerted me, hey, be cautious. Before I sell this false narrative, Zinga finga mvuyinye. I must say, hey, maybe I need to do an extensive drive around town later this afternoon and see, maybe I'll have a different perspective.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. I think we are just a little bit over time, 2 minutes over time. I won't allow any questions now or whatsoever. I'm teaching ethics. So we have the Mahlangu Commissioner around us. We want to say thank you to you. But I'll give this brown envelope. There is no money here. I don't want tomorrow to appear in the commission to Mahlangu and they say Dr. Maokoto gave a brown envelope. There is a lot of brown envelopes going under the tables. But we want to say thank you to you as the Winter School Commission, but also the Faculty of Stellenbosch, or Theology at Stellenbosch University. Thank you for coming and addressing us on this topic, which is a very, really important topic for, I heard you were saying that in the presence of, if students were here, and I think that information as lecturers will take it to our students in the class. What we've learned here, there are church leaders around here, they will preach about this on Sunday. We don't need to preach only the Jesus that saves, but we also need to save the soul of South Africa. From your side, we really want to thank you as the commissioner, but also the whole commission of the CRL for your inputs in South Africa. This debate continues. I was expecting more questions on the floor with regards to this regulation by the CRL or by the government, and I know it spited a lot of debates. But thank you so much, and this is a small token of appreciation, but also for your time. Thank you so much.